19th. Oh, my goodness gracious. I'm getting dental surgery that day.
Time for that.
Yeah,
Well, that's not what the guy was.
well, what that guy was describing doing. That's what put me out. Well, I'm getting an implant, so they gotta
Might not be bad.
take this out. I had too much time to think about it.
Okay, looks like we're at 4 o'clock here today. So at this time, we will call to order the November 9th, 2015 meeting of the Salina City Commission, and we'll start with a roll call, please.
Mayor Blanchard.
Here.
Commissioner Crawford.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here?
Commissioner Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Okay, at this time, we'll ask that all who are able to please stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Okay, we have no awards and proclamations, so we'll move right into citizens forum, and this is just an opportunity for any member of the public to stand and make comments of concern to them, and we just ask that your comments be limited to 5 minutes and that you give your name and address when you approach the podium. Okay, looks like we have no public or citizens forum today, and we also have no public hearings or items scheduled for a certain time, so we'll move directly into the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of November 2nd, 2015. Item 6.2, approve a request to allow Salina Downtown, Inc. to reallocate $12,000 in city funds originally granted to them for the purpose of buying downtown light pole banner brackets to be used to purchase bicycle racks.
Okay, are there any items that any commissioner would like to have removed or amended from the consent agenda? Not, I'll entertain a...
I move we approve the consent agenda as printed.
Second?
Okay, motion is second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. We'll move to administration.
Item 7.1, resolution number 15-7296, authorizing the mayor to enter into a members agreement with the Salina Airport Authority, Salina Area Chamber of Commerce, and Saline County to create the Salina Community Economic Development Organization, Inc.
Okay, we'll hear from City Manager Jason Gage for a background and some introductions of some people that might be here.
Okay, Mayor, Commissioners, thank you very much. The city had contracted for economic development services with the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce for quite some time. And then in 14, that time frame ended, and many in the community got together, and we all agreed that creating a new approach to economic development might be in the best interest of the community, and really felt the need to explore that. And so the city and Salina Airport Authority contracted with the International Economic Development Council to facilitate a look at our programs, to bring stakeholders together, get their input, and so forth. So they came to town in June of 2014, and they felt that we should create a public-private partnership economic development organization. And in essence, the main difference between that and the prior structure is really just really the centerpiece of where it happens, but the partnerships are really all the same. They felt that stakeholders need to form consensus on how the entity would be structured, that some of the key services, marketing, attraction, central communications with state and other agencies should be transferred to the EDO in accordance with general agreement, but that the Chamber of Commerce would retain certain responsibilities as well. And without question, the City of Salina, Saline County, and Salina Airport Authority would all have primary partnership and integral roles. They recommended, in the end, a budget of not less than $400,000 and staff of at least 3.5 personnel, and that an experienced ED leader be hired as CEO, and also recommended considering hiring a fundraising consultant at some point. And after we received that report, we formed you appointed, as a governing body, you appointed an EDO working group that had stakeholder representation for all of those entities, and also the K-State University Polytechnic, in addition to certain other folks from the public. And out of that, they had certain recommendations, and most of them were fairly similar. They had more specific recommendations on allocation of tasks. I won't go through all of that, but a lot of the tasks, as I just mentioned, would be with the EDO. The city would take on community development and placemaking. The airport authority would, of course, take on air service retention and development, as one would expect. And the chamber would continue to provide business retention, existing business expansion services, workforce and labor development, tourism and hospitality, and small business startups via Project Open or some other form, in addition to the general community perception and image, which is really kind of falls under that Visit Salina function. Recommended a staffing of 3 people: executive director, director of marketing, research, and administrative support. Initially recommended really an interim kind of first office location out at the airport terminal for the startup period until we could figure out a long-term approach to the housing of it. That has since changed to the Chamber of Commerce facility. An EDO budget of $350,000 per operating for the operating budget per year. And at that time, again, there was certain support that would have been provided at the airport, but since that was determined not to be a viable option for other operational reasons at that facility, as it came over to the chamber, there's certain limited support that can be provided there as well. That funding would be both public and private. That's what is desired, but initially they recognized that the public funding was going to have to lift it up. That the entity would have a board of directors of 9 persons, with 3 appointments from the city, 2 from each of the other 3 entities. Over the last year, the staff people from those main 4 entities have met regularly to take that and create the real detail, which is in front of you today, in the form of articles of incorporation, bylaws, and a members agreement. There's some repetition, but I won't go through a lot of it because a lot of it's kind of boring stuff you'd find in all agreements. But I'll try to hit some highlights for you here, and it is, for the most part, I think does reflect pretty close to the EDO working group recommendation. But generally speaking, it established the entity as a not-for-profit corporation under Section 501c6. So it's its own separate entity, even though the members, the 4 members, have appointments to the board. It's its own separate entity, and the board of directors then would work under their bylaws. The general purpose is to promote and support economic development for the benefit of all citizens in Saline County. It's pretty obvious. The functional purposes are exactly as recommended by the EDO working group. The certain prohibitions, as you would typically have with the 501c6 organizations, are in place with this organization as well. The members, of course, are the City of Salina, the Airport Authority, Saline County, and Salina Area Chamber of Commerce, as drawn up. The terms are the same, or the appointments, I should say, are the same, with the city having 3 and the other entities having 2. And it addresses other typical organizational issues, immunities and limitations to liability and so forth. As we look at that's the Articles of Incorporation. As we look at the bylaws, it includes many of the same types of provisions. It restates those. Some things of importance is it is to operate under the Kansas Open Meetings Act with a quorum of 5 members, including the application of Robert's Rules of Order. So it's pretty typical to a city board. It would have the typical officers that you'd expect an organization to have: a president, a vice president, a secretary, and a treasurer. They can have certain committees that they can designate authority to if they should choose to do that. We included in there the application of the substantial interest test and common law test for purposes of determining conflicts of interest. Felt that was very important. And let's see, as we enter into the members agreement, where we really get into more detail, again, some of those other aspects are included. The locations I mentioned would be Suite B over at 120 West Ash, which is the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce facility, and appreciate the graciousness in offering that for the interim. And what the agreement calls for is not less than 6 months prior to the end of the second year. It just asks for the board of directors to take a look at the facility, make sure it makes sense or doesn't make sense, and then decide what they want to do. But they just have to take a look and see if that's still a good fit. Maybe, it may not be. The members agreement requires an annual budget by October 1st and financial reporting by March 1st. creates a 3-year funding cycle, so the obligations are in 3-year increments. I think that's important to note. And it conditions membership to funding and includes a specific default provision, and including to a non-appropriations clause, which is typical for governmental entities. Members may withdraw voluntarily effective December 31st at the end of each 3-year cycle. So the voluntary opportunity is in that 3-year increment. Notice does need to be provided by the preceding April 1st. It does require the organization, which means the board of directors, to create a 3-year program of work in the form of a strategic plan, which is to include the funding needs as well. And that is to occur by May 15th of every third year with annual updates by December 31st. So it's a kind of a 3-year document, but they look at it each year in the same way we would our capital improvement plan or our strategic plan. It does provide for acceptance of private donations to the organization. Now, the organization at this point wouldn't have any intentions of doing a private fundraising drive, but it's typical that a 501c6 would have the opportunity to receive those. And so at some point in the future, if citizens, businesses, or whomever wishes to donate to the organization, they certainly have the right to and the ability to do that. It does require adoption of financial policies and financial controls, records inspection, and an annual audit. And those will be things that, when this is formed up, initially the staff people from these member organizations will help them put together for logistical purposes. It provides basic indemnification and insurance requirements, requires non-discrimination in accordance with Chapter 13 of the Salina Code, and then other basic legal provisions. Both the Salina Airport Authority and Chamber of Commerce boards have already looked at the terms and are in agreement with those with regards to the member agreement. Excuse me. Please note, too, that the member agreement is actually a document that actually adopts the Articles of Incorporation and the bylaws, so you don't have to take 3 actions. The members' agreement does that for you. We do expect the Saline County Board of Directors to take action sometime after you take action this evening. I haven't spoken with the county administrator to know if that would be tomorrow or within the next week or 2, but I would expect it to be pretty soon. If approved by the governing body and by the other entities, but particularly by you tonight, we would request that you immediately announce the acceptance of expression of interest forms. We have had at least one person I know come by and filled out a form, even though we weren't quite ready. I said, just fill it out and write it in. That's fine. We'll keep it on file. But we think that's the typical process we have in selecting members to our boards, and we believe it makes sense here. And I think a couple of weeks is more than enough time, and by the time you have that interest, you can, if you would like, you can address it in the same way you would any committee appointments with your resolution and a majority vote, if that works for you. And by that time, we should expect to have the appointments of the other entities and should be ready to actually start scheduling a board meeting. Again, staff would expect to provide quite a lot of support until we actually hire an executive director, and would expect to provide any assistance in creating the profile, working with the board as well. So a fiscal note on, you might ask yourself, well, how are we going to pay for this, right? Sure, of course you would. When we look at it, again, we're looking at a 3-year commitment, and for 3 years, we have $320,000 per year. What we did when we looked at the 340s, we offset basically the market rate cost of what it would cost to go out and actually pay rent for an office location. So being housed in the chamber does offset the total cost for the entity, which is kind of a nice thing as we start up. So as we break it down, based on the communicated commitments from the other entities, the 3 entities are the 3 governmental entities that would be paying directly into this. And the first year, 2016, the city's amount would be $308,000, the airport authority is $15,000, and Saline County is $20,000. In the second year, the city's amount would go down at the same number to $275,000, with $25,000 from the Salina Airport Authority, and Saline County would have $20,000. And part of that first year cost, there's a first year startup cost aspect. That's why that number is a little higher than the future years. And in the third year, the cities would be $250,000, and the Salina Airport Authority would ratchet up to $50,000. And at this point, the Saline County commitment is $20,000 again in 2018. So you have our commitment actually goes down some, partially because of not having a startup cost in future years, and partially because the Salina Airport Authority's amount goes from $15,000 in year 1 up to $50,000 in year 3. And Saline County's amount is $20,000. At this point, is expected to be $20,000 each of the 3 years. We're looking at 2 sources of funding from the city budget. We already have $175,000 in our general fund that's budgeted that we would expect to apply to that. And we would recommend that the balance the city pays would be from the special sales tax allocation for economic development. And in looking at that, certainly there's discretion and authority, ability to use the funds for that purpose. It's part of the recruitment and all the core aspects of economic development. That funding source by itself generates about $320,000 a year, that sales tax. When we looked at the strategic plan, we do believe it conforms. One of your goals is to provide the highest quality of services consistent with your direction, available resources, and staff commitment to quality. And I think there's been a lot of work by all these entities, and even beyond that, to form this up. We believe that we are recommending to you a structure that would help us do the best possible work for economic development in our community. I think all the entities are confident we can do that working together and intend to do that. So we believe that the creation of this partnership organization will create that environment. So we have 3 alternatives and recommended action. And alternative 1 is to adopt the attached resolution that authorizes the mayor to enter into the members' agreement with the other 3 entities. Alternative 2, would be to, if there are minor adjustments to the agreement or resolution or anything we could deal with on the spot, to approve the resolution with the minor adjustments, or if not, if they're maybe more significant, to postpone for maybe a week or whatever, however long it takes to remedy that, but to postpone it hopefully for a week, draw it up with the changes you recommend, and then bring it back for action. And obviously, we always provide the option of not adopting the action, taking action at this time. Again, we have spent a lot of time, and we really think that if we haven't hit the bullseye, we're awfully close on this issue. And so I think representing at least the entities that have been a part of this, we're recommending that the commission approve alternative number 1. Be happy to take questions. I know we have Representatives Rita Deister's here from Saline County. Tim Rogers is here with the Salina Airport Authority. And Don Weiser and Frank Hampton are here representing the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. And there may be others I haven't seen, but we're all happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Thank you for that report and questions.
Yeah. Mr. Gage, I was initially very strongly in favor of a separate location for the EDO, so it would not appear as though it was operating under the auspices of any of the member organizations. So the EDO could have its independent identity and work forward from that. The chamber made a very generous offer for space, and I'll just say in-kind, probably physical assistance as the EDO gets started. But it was at least it was my understanding, it would be with a separate entrance and separate signage on the building, so it would not look as though this is part and parcel part of the Chamber of Commerce.
That's
Even though
correct.
the 2 organizations obviously have similar functions and will overlap to some degree.
Yeah, that's correct. There's an Exhibit D, and that addresses that. And what it basically does, it provides for the separate entrance. This would be from the west side, and there's an opportunity for the EDO organization to create a sign with its own brand to be placed so that folks
Okay.
know that. And
Now,
in
does-
addition, the chamber would provide basically receptionist phone support as well for the organization.
Yeah, does that need to be moved up into section second, the EDO office location in the resolution?
I don't, well, go ahead, Greg, if you'd like.
That's entirely at the Board of Commissioners' discretion, but the thought was that Exhibit D does address that complete relationship during the time in which the offices would be located there at the Chamber, and it addresses each of those components. That's what prompted thinking that it was better placed there, and it is equally binding.
Okay, so it is, okay.
It's, that exhibit is incorporated by reference into the members' agreement. So
Okay.
that's what prompted that structure.
Thank you.
So you mentioned the phone service being shared.
The actual phone service would be separate, but in there, as far as a receptionist, someone who would receive people as they walk in or would call, the setup would be basically a separate line, and with a welcome they'd be able to tell which organization the call's coming into, so the welcome can be tailored to the EDO, because they'll know that that's the call that's coming in.
So the administrative assistant would be shared?
No, not in this case. That's just the receptionist duties. We really anticipated both because of burden on labor for the chamber and for the need to have dedicated administrative support that an administrative assistant would be strictly associated with the EDO.
Any further questions for staff at this time?
Do we have a timeline then for hiring the staff?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. I think, again, you'll be the third party to take action. Hopefully, Saline County Board of Directors will take action as well. And then once that occurs, that will frame up, the organization will be created. And then the next step would be to appoint the board. And again, if we allow a couple of weeks, we hope to come back in a couple of weeks for you for an appointment. I think by then we will have the members from the other entities. I expect that. So we'll have our board. We'll know who they are. And then we'll need to have an organizational meeting and get some logistics done and figure out our homework as a staff to help them initially. And part of that and part of the directive for the board actually in the members agreement initially is to focus on hiring that executive director, that recruitment process. And so whatever assistance, again, that we can provide in helping them to create the profile and market that position, we will do that because we know we need to do that immediately. Generally speaking, and it depends on the success of finding someone, by the time you start a recruitment process, you're probably 4 to 6 months by the time you actually get someone in the seat. And so that's what I anticipate. It could be spring. I'm thinking if we're successful, anywhere from spring to about the time school lets out. I'm just guesstimating at this point would be when someone is actually here and in the seat. And then they'll need to be looking at the rest of their staffing and other aspects, and they'll have just a huge list of homework items to do.
When I'm looking at the process that we've gone through on this, and there's generally, I get a lot of questions in the community about, what's going on with economic development and with the different changes, and particularly asking about the EDO. When we're looking at the desire of the entities to create this economic development organization, as far as what, for the general business owner, community member, taxpayer, what can they expect to be different from this than the way it has been? What will be the most noticeable differences?
Well, you'll have a, in some ways, it may not look a lot different from their perspective. For example, you'll have a community-based board of directors to deal with specifically for the economic development matters. You'll have the other entities that are all going to have a role depending on if maybe it's an airport prospect versus a prospect somewhere else. So our governmental rules will be pretty similar. But in essence, you will have an independent community collective body entity that is responsible for much of the primary tasks associated with economic development. Some of the faces may actually be the same. We don't know yet who the board members will be, but some of the faces I'm presuming will have been involved in some fashion with this before, and some of the faces will likely be different as well. So that depends. They'll be dealing with a new person in town when that director's hired and that director's staff. So whoever those people become, they'll be really going there first for a lot of these primary aspects. The relationship with the state and federal entities will be first and foremost primarily with the EDO, and then with the rest of us collectively complementing that relationship with our roles. And quite honestly, my expectation is, and it really as it has been, but I expect it to be the same, all of our relationships will be integrated, and our support for the unit will be integrated together. And so you will have an independent entity, but in a lot of ways, the integration from a customer service perspective will be the same, and should be the same. It's kind of a single face. You always want a single face to the effort. And so we all know that in communities you have so many different entities involved in it, and we don't have as many as some larger communities do, but you want a single face to that. And so we'll have a single direction, and especially when we have a strategic plan, we'll have the direction, the highway, and an integrated approach to it. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Well, that's operational. What about outcome oriented? What are
Okay.
anticipated outcomes?
Yeah, one of the things that you'll see in there is, again, when we talk about the strategic plan, it'll talk about a kind of a program of services, primary services, strategic aspects to what's going on and the dollars with them, but a focus on outcomes and metrics. As we kind of have been, we've had metrics that we've been working from before. There's going to be really two things. We want to always pay attention to our community's economic health. Now, that's not fair to call that a grade card for an economic activity, but it at least tells you what your community's economic health is, that we're focusing on that. But then there will be likely be metrics and standards for outcomes that some of which the IEDC recommended, and they have a laundry list that you can choose from. But we may be looking at, how many of buildings of a certain type are currently vacant, and what's our goal in the next 3 years for occupancy. What type of quality, or what's the quantity of quality and premier jobs we'd like to bring into our community, and the strategies there will be a lot of outcomes that'll be open. A lot of those will be open record. The strategies may not necessarily be. Just want to make sure people recognize that there's certain aspects of this that if they're trade secret related, they may not be, but the outcome piece will be out there for everybody to see, and it'll be a collective effort of everyone to come up with those metrics and then work hard to try to be successful.
Questions? I have further questions, but we'll go ahead at this point and hear from either representatives for other entities at first, and then following that, we'll hear public comment. So we can put that together, or you can do it separately, whoever comes to the mic first. So, but the preference would be if anyone from the airport authority or the chamber or the county would like to say anything, this is an opportunity.
Next.
Yay, nay?
Not required.
Okay. We'll open it for public comment then at this time. And we just ask that you limit your comments to the topic at hand, and please keep your comments brief and to the point. Name and address, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Hello.
Ray Ruska, 235 North Santa Fe. Mr. Gage was just making a comment about ADO funding, his public and private sector. My concern is the public sector and the taxes it's going to cost us. And the fiscal note at the beginning of the presentation says it's going to come from an economic development funding source that annually generates approximately $320,000. Is this the source of the SEDIC? And is a second part to that question, is that entity going to be dissolved? The SEDIC.
Thank you. Is that all your?
No, I got some more. Yeah.
Well, go ahead and get them all out, and then we'll let him respond to those. And we're not going to have a debate up here. We're just going to.
I'm not asking
You
for a
ask your-
debate. I'm asking for answers to some questions. That's what
Okay.
it's for, isn't it?
Yeah, go ahead and ask those questions, and then we'll go ahead and have the city manager respond to your questions.
I would prefer to answer to questions one at a time because there's some issues.
Well, we're not going to have a back and forth. We're going
Well,
to.
this is not a debate. This is about public issues. Do you understand that?
Make your 3-minute comment, and then please.
Wait a
return to
minute.
your
On a
seat.
3-minute comment, it's based on, it's in the public or citizens forum, not in
It's-
an issue like this.
No, it's it's.
Are you making a
our,
rule about that then?
our rules are clear, and they're.
Well,
printed
it
on
says
our-
3 minutes, not for public comment, for public
You're-
comment only.
You're spending your 3 minutes unwisely here. So please
Mr.
continue.
Mayor, I could filibuster with the answers if you'd like.
Well, no,
ahead.
I want you to have all your questions answered, and that's why I'd like to proceed through the.
Okay,
Through the
then, we'll
process
go
here.
to the second question.
Okay.
Where's the chamber on the fiscal note? It says City, Salina Airport Authority, and Saline County. I mean, what is the chamber going to do here? Then the other part of it is, initially, I attended most of these meetings, and I think you were aware of that, and Mr. Chairman. I think I made this comment in a previous meeting. To generate economic development is not with money. The opportunity has to come. You don't sit around to make this happen. Opportunity is the issue, and when the key is fulfilled, economic opportunity, then the people who are the entrepreneurs will step up and stick their money into economic development, not the taxpayer. And the initial number that I heard was $750,000 a year, and now it's down to $308,000 per year and a little bit less after that. Why did that change? And how much money has been spent so far in creating all this paper? From attorneys to staff to everybody involved so that we can spend money, taxpayer money. It seems to me that the initial participant in this whole situation was the city wants this. And I heard comments at those meetings that were pretty, that shouldn't have been said. But another final, maybe not a final question here, but why wasn't the people allowed to vote on this referendum so that the city can spend more money? Can we bring a petition forth and say, let's vote on this issue? Or is it just going to be a resolution, whether it's legislative or a resolution? I mean, there's all kinds of issues here that we just keep thinking that we're going to just create something and it's going to just fly like a 747. Well, this is going to stumble. It's going to fail. And guess who gets to pay the bill? The person that doesn't have the parachute. And that's the taxpayer. I had a question asked me at one of the IEDC meetings from Jeff Mays. He said he was willing to donate $5,000 per year. Show me the donation check. He made that, trying to say that he was the one that actually thought of some of these issues about how to do this. And I just don't buy into this whole situation because it's not about the taxpayer and economic development. It's about the city spending money. You just spend. That's all you can do is spend. And when you get tired of spending, when we run out of money, what do we do then? Do we just keep going and going and going? Or the economic development going on right now, or the issue about I defined economic development earlier today, and it says it has been understood since World War II to involve economic growth, namely the increases in per capita income. How is this going to increase the per capita income of the people? I don't think any one of you can answer that. If you can, you're smarter than any economist that I know of, and the government can't even do it. Economic development can also be considered as a static theory that documents the state of an economy at a certain time. The state of our economy is lousy right now. We're in deep doo-doo, and I think everyone on this board knows it. It's nationally, statewide, locally, and you're part of it. So you need to decide whether or not you're going to go along with spending more money or go along with a proposal, presented that, as far as I'm concerned, was corrupt from the start.
Okay, thank you. Now, I think we've got about 6 questions here, and I appreciate your questions.
So do I have rebuttal? Any answers in there?
Well, I'll just invite you to take. I gave you double the 3 minutes, but
Well, thank you.
we'll go ahead and answer those questions. But we thank you for posing them. I had 6 questions here. Feel free to go ahead and take your seat too. First was about the SCDIC. Is this going to resolve our? Is it going to? Are we going to get rid of the SCDIC?
Yeah.
Second was on the chamber on there. The funding of the chamber.
If you like,
funding.
Mayor, I've got a pretty good list. I can go through them if you like.
Well,
I
you
don't
can,
mind
but
doing
first of all, we'll just go ahead and ask, if you would, please,
So I'm excused? I can just sit down like
like everyone
Mama
else.
tells me to sit down?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
that's
everyone
what I
else.
thought.
Thank you.
that. Okay. The first question was the source of funds. Is that the same source that the SCDIC uses? The SCDIC is the Salina Economic Development Incentives Council. It's an advisory board to the City Commission on economic development matters. And, excuse me, one of the things that it does advise is utilization of the sales tax for incentives for business prospects. And so, yeah, that's out of the same pot of sales tax because that's allocated for economic development interests, not just for incentives. The second is, will the SEDIC dissolve? That question can't quite be answered, but I do believe that's a question to be contemplated once this board's formed, because I think personally that what will happen is you will rely on this board for advice and so forth, and they'll come back to you with recommendations on incentives and other aspects of a deal, so to speak, with a business prospect. But I do believe that that's yet to be determined. Where's the chamber on the fiscal note? Well, when we look at the...
I was just going to ask, if you want me to address that, I can explain what prompted the structure of Schedule D in the way it is. As I understood, that was possibly related.
Tell you what, yeah, if you'll, let me cover real quick, and I'll go right at you. The main thing to remember is that the chamber still retains certain, very specific and significant role as it relates to economic development in our community. Not everything switched over to the EDO. For example, as I mentioned before, they retain business retention efforts, existing business expansion efforts, workforce and labor development efforts, tourism and hospitality, small business startups, and community perception and image. And so there obviously is a cost to providing those services, and as a result, we consider that we're looking at this again as an integrated partnership, a community partnership for the role, and they're still taking on that piece, in addition to the offsetting costs of housing the entity, at least in the interim, or at least for a couple, 3 years. With that, Greg, go ahead if you want to fill in the Exhibit D.
Well, just the point, and Mr. Ruska made reference to the fiscal note. The fiscal note speaks strictly to the monetary contribution. The Exhibit D was also structured in a way to show the combination of the economic value of the chamber's participation in kind, as well as the monetary support. Depending upon your action today, will enable us to complete Schedule D as to the city's monetary support as well. But that's the snapshot it was intended to create.
Question 4, why the budget went from 700 and some thousand, or a budget recommendation, down to what would be 320,000, also with the emphasis of we want to spend, spend, spend. First of all, I'm going to go to the spend, spend, spend real quick. I think if Mr. Ruska had another minute, he probably would have realized and thanked us from, in essence, cutting in half the recommended initial budget that was really based on what were supposed to be comparable communities across the region. But when we looked at them, we said, in the startup, we don't think that we need to have a budget that's high, or at that level, and that we could bring that budget down to a reasonable level. So from a taxpayer's perspective, that's a good thing. And if we were going to spend, we probably wouldn't hand it over to another entity, because once this entity is formed, it is an independent entity. It's not a direct extension of the city any more than it would be of the other member partners. And so we're, in essence, taking economic development. We're still saying, really, truly, based on the board makeup and the structure, private sector, with any help that we can provide, let's get out there and see what we can do to generate jobs. How much did it cost to create all the paper? I have no idea. Most of us are on staff. It's really a time issue more than anything else. But I think all of the key community stakeholders and a lot of others in this town felt that it was essential to create whatever that structure needs to be to take us forward into the future. So everyone worked really hard to do that. Why wouldn't people be allowed to vote on it? I think this would clearly fall into an administrative item by state law, in which you don't have the discretion or authority to take it out for a vote any more than we do to fix a sidewalk in front of Mr. Ruska's office, his business.
Or the Bicentennial Center.
Or that. How would this increase the per capita income of the people? Well, I'd be the first to tell you that nothing happens overnight. But if in time, and it might be a decade, it might be longer, I don't know. But in time, if the efforts are successful, the point of this is to leverage ourselves as a community with all of our community partners, public, private, nonprofit, to draw attention to us, to demonstrate to others what Salina has to offer, and hopefully at some point certain folks at different times make decisions to bring a business or expand a business here and add what we call quality and premier jobs that are good paying jobs with good benefits. And if we can do that in time, you arguably would see an increase in per capita income. That's the whole point, is to increase the wealth in your community. It's not easy, and no one ever said it was, and it takes a lot of time. It's not a one-year thing. It is truly a long-term approach, and I think that's the approach we've always taken, the approach we'll continue to take. But I do believe, and I think the others, if they wish to, can speak to that, that we're creating an environment to give ourselves the best opportunity for success. And that's what I think we'll do well with that.
Right. And you hit all of those, and I don't know if anybody wants to add to those, but, I think I think that many of the questions have merit, and I think that the answers were very good and direct to that. One of the answers, too, on the startup costs, too, are that I don't think we're fully looking at all of the positions that they recommended, as well as spending money on a private fundraising consultant as well. So there are a number of things that, we've taken stock of and said we've got members of the different entities that can fulfill some of those roles as well. And I think the last one's probably the most important. I think it's part of the reason why we're here. Economic development is being done in a completely different way across the landscape. And it's all a goal of raising decades of stagnant incomes. And I think that our best chance moving forward is to embrace a new model. And I think we've got a good plan put together here to work from. But that's the goal, is we hear about how incomes are stagnant, and we need to do everything we can to not only provide higher opportunities for wages, but better overall quality of life elements into the community that our part, being particularly about placemaking, I think begins to contribute to that piece of the economic development model that we're looking at here.
I agree, Mayor. And if you really add up all the time that was put into this, I mean, certainly our staff and staffs from the other entities had some time into it, but there was a tremendous amount of time put in from the private sector, people that volunteered their time, and that will add up to far more hours than the rest of us put in. And the way I look at it is if the private sector, the public sector, the nonprofit sectors, really basically every sector that makes up your community says, this is important to us and we think we can be successful working together, I think it's worth the time to do it.
Yeah. And I know that everybody up here did too. This is probably just an illustration, but I brought this, that's my file on this process. And that doesn't count the studies that were produced and everything else. So that's quite a bit of time and paper. I mean, I don't know how many trees that is, but that's a lot of effort. And I know all of you up here and past commissioners put a lot of time into this too. Do you have further questions?
I was just going to say, communities have two choices. And one of those is not staying the same. You either advance and you get better, or you die. And you drive north, you drive west of here, and you see communities that have died. This city has too much on the ball right now to just think we're going to sit still and good things are going to happen to us. This whole country is not in a rut. There's a lot of prosperity still going on, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be getting our fair share and more of it. I think we're uniquely positioned to really be one of those lasting shining star cities in the state. And it's like surgery. There's a risk of having an operation, but sometimes the bigger risk is not having the operation. And I think we need to look at what we're going to potentially lose by not doing this. In that regard, it's a small amount of money for a very large potential windfall.
May I respond to that?
No, sir. One of the things, and it would be kind of along those same lines, and I just have a couple of questions. If Don or Frank, on behalf of the chamber, I just had a couple of questions for you guys. So if you guys wouldn't mind, and it just has to go to when we're talking about the partnership and the in-kind and the task and roles that you're putting on. From the standpoint of business retention and going out and meeting with existing business owners and finding out the needs and all that, is this going to be something that in the past when the city was funding the chamber, it was one thing. But with your own funding and no funding coming from the city, are you going to be extending those services that you provide to your member to non-member business owners? If a business owner is not a member of the chamber, will you still be working with them on all the same type of retention?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I mean, a couple things. To start out with, we have a very strong chamber here in Salina. I think when we looked at it last year, 95% of all employees belong to a business who is a member of a chamber. Now, part of that's because big employers, by and large, are chamber members. I would say for the smaller members out there, and the smaller members, certainly we've had them as we've come through the Project Open, that for those businesses, excuse me, I'm having a little chest cold this week, but for those businesses that are not members, I think when they come to us, we try to not only help them, but we try to actively recruit them to become members. And so I think if you look at the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce, I think if you look at our membership, I think it's a very broad membership. I think the staff is very welcoming as far as trying to solve problems and help any business. And typically the businesses who've really come to us on retention and expansion efforts that are large enough, in which, you know, maybe at that point in time we would talk to someone with the city or someone with the county or someone at the airport authority, that typically those members have all been members of the Salina Area Chamber at that time. Because a lot of the members we don't have might be smaller, might be for financial reasons, and some of them might not be expanding at that time. But we certainly are welcome to, we help, and I think you can look at the track record through Project Open. You know, we've helped small businesses that are members of the Salina Area Chamber, and we've helped small businesses that are not members of the Salina Chamber of Commerce. I hope that
Okay. Well, yeah,
answers that
I
question.
mean, I know it's tricky both ways. First is that you're not being compensated to, you know, you have an obligation to your membership, and not being compensated to help non-members, and yet having that as part of the effort being with the chamber. The EDO isn't going to be responsible for expansion, retention, and all those things. But whether or not they're a member of the chamber, it's important that we retain those and that we help them expand and so on. So I think
Certainly,
you
and-
did, in that you are supportive of that. And
Yeah, and we certainly have in programs that we've been a part of. I mean, the Project Open is kind of a joint partnership where we just provide support. Ultimately, I mean, I think we're, you know, it's a conduit, you know, pass through where the monies are just available for the businesses who apply for them, and we use some of our staff time. Typically, SDI had used part of their staff time. We use people from North Central Planning, but you know, the help there had not been a litmus test. Don't come to Project Open until you've signed your Salina Area Chamber Commerce membership. That's not to say that we won't ask you to be a member, to join along with most of the rest of the business community to be a member of the chamber, but it never was a prerequisite.
okay, all right.
Anybody else?
Any more questions? No. Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I
Mayor-
would like to thank the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce, Don and Mr. Hampton, and the Salina Airport Authority and Saline County Board of Commissioners for working together to create the EDO and to work toward improving our economy. I attended some of those meetings, and I think sometimes it's a good thing to kind of hash things out and get things going. And I'm really hopeful that this is going to really help our local economy. So thank you very much.
Mayor, if I may, I had a question to address at whatever stage you think appropriate.
That was good.
Okay. Mayor, Commissioners, you may have noticed in Section 6 on the organizational meeting of the board, there is a blank. And that has been one of those provisions that, of course, is somewhat subject to the progression as the members have considered these documents. I didn't know, and this is more of a question, with the folks that we have in the room, whether you thought it might be worth taking a moment to see if we could try to determine what that date might be as to when each of the members might be expected to appoint their respective board members. Now, I don't mean to presume an outcome on your decision today, but if at some point in the discussion today, and with the benefit of the others that are in the room, I thought it was something we might be able to make a little progress on and had just not had that opportunity previously.
What if we were to start with December 31st?
Well, I realize we don't have the full boards of the other prospective members, but that's, as I say,
Are you looking for are you looking for a date or?
or a recommended date, and if
Recommended. Well, I'd
or if-
recommend by the end of the year, and that way we don't let this drag into next year.
and I did,
Commissioners, if you allow 2 weeks to obtain expression of interest forms, that brings back your appointment for the city's 3 members on the 23rd. That's the Monday of Thanksgiving week, which we do, at this point, we have scheduled as a meeting date. It might be, I don't know if Rita Deister would be able to tell us yet with the county where they would be. So that's probably the piece that we don't know yet, but we hopefully will know soon. But I would expect that with the airport authority and the chamber that they may already know who their members would be. So I don't think that timing would be in conflict with their objective. I don't believe. So,
Airport Authority Board will have on their agenda a week from Wednesday,
okay.
their appointments, the 18th.
So the airport authority board would have on their agenda for the 18th for that purpose. And I know the chamber, I think, knows where they're going with that as well. So we may be the last one, or maybe right in there. I would suggest possibly, but if we don't know for sure, but that we look at the first or second week in December. I think the earlier we can get to that, and we will have enough, even if we can't get them all, we'll still have enough to have a meeting, won't we?
it'd be good to have them all, but.
It would be. I think it would be too.
But the answer is yes.
Would we be taking formal action on that?
What'll happen is that'll be one of the blanks that's filled in prior to signature of the agreement. And so in that case, then all the entities would sign that as well. So in essence, yes.
Okay, so why don't we figure on what the dates of those Mondays are that, what are our options?
The first Monday in December is the 7th.
A day that will live in
But
infamy.
we're talking about an organizational meeting of the actual board, is that correct?
Well, we're actually just talking about the appointments, and then there's a 30-day window afterward
Okay.
that the board is to meet.
Okay.
So this is strictly the proposed deadline for appointment.
For all the appointments.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I would expect, unless there's any question or you need more time, that you will probably be making your appointments on the 23rd, if you allow 2 weeks. It's up to you to decide that, but that's why I would somewhat expect you to be the 23rd or the 30th. So beyond that, I
You're
can't speak for
saying
the
November or
others.
December? For the appointments on our part?
November.
November.
Yeah.
It'd have to be the 23rd. We don't meet on the 30th.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it would be the
Okay,
23rd.
let's put that date down then. Sound good?
The 30th of December.
So Greg, then you need to make
November
sure that
23rd.
the other
It's
entities
awfully fast.
would also be able to have their appointments
Yeah,
made by that date, or by the fixed date.
I can certainly do that. I mean, yes, we need
That would
to-
allow that board to meet before the end of the year.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I don't want to put Rita on the spot, but I may have to.
I keep looking back
I'm gonna
there. thinking-
Ask Rita if based on where the county's at right now, if she knows or has even a feeling that would be reasonable. I don't know wouldn't expect her to know the exact date by
I
any
think
means.
that may be just a little bit soon because we haven't had any expression of interest forms yet. I'm assuming that tomorrow when we meet, we'll discuss this, but they probably won't take any action until the next week at the earliest. And then to get out for interest, and the commissioners may already have people that they've talked to, but it hasn't been discussed. So if you back it up one more week, I think we'd be more likely to have something like the 1st of December maybe would be better for us.
And I'm hoping we have enough time that we have some diversity on that board, too.
Okay.
Well,
So-
that's at our, that's our responsibility, so.
Well,
But
you know, I
they'll be
think
appointing them.
one disadvantage of doing this very early in December is that the last 10 to 14 days of December and the first week of January probably aren't the greatest time to schedule a meeting. So 21 of those 30 days are going to be lost.
I think so.
Yeah, I was kind
Forgetting-
of hoping we could get one in, but I'm pretty anxious to get this thing going.
I think we'll be able to let it's not a requirement that you have to wait 30 days. They could take action prior to that, so.
Yeah, and again, what we're talking about is the date is the date by which all the entities, members would have their appointments made. So based on what Ms. Deister indicated, first of all, just look at a Tuesday, because that correlates with the county's meeting. And maybe you have the 8th, the 15th, probably the 8th and the 15th makes sense as you get into December. The 22nd's getting a little close to Christmas, not sure what happens that week. Possibly the 15th would be a good date, gives a little time. And that, again, that's not for a meeting, that's just to get the appointments set.
But there will be expression of interest forms, right?
That sounds like would possibly be the county's intent in the same way that we do that as
Well,
well.
let's go ahead and fill our blank in for December 7th.
This would relate to all.
We
all
need the
entities.
last date by which all entities would have the appointments made. And that's
Oh,
why,
okay,
that's
so-
why Tuesday may make sense.
December
And-
8th, and then we'll have our,
Yeah, I think the 8th or the
or just
15th
prior to
or
whatever
the
our
29th
meeting
are
is
your
on
three
the-
choices.
Then ours would need to be reset if, say, for some reason the county does not approve the agreement until, let's just say, the first week in December. Obviously, December, we'd have to push ours back.
As far as the appointments being official, I suppose you would, because you wouldn't have official appointees when you don't have an organization officially approved by all the entities yet, but you could still pretty much get there.
Okay.
So December 7th before 4 o'clock.
I would, well, again, to correlate with the county meeting on Tuesday, I would recommend the 8th, the 15th, or the 29th. That avoids the week of Christmas, and you can
Okay.
choose any of those if you think. The 15th might not be a bad date to shoot for here.
15th sounds better to me.
15th.
Good.
So Tuesday, December
I
15th.
can be persuaded, but the 15th sounds better.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment on this item before we close that portion? Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the commission for action.
Mr. Mayor, I move adoption of resolution number 15-7296.
Excuse me.
No, sir, please sit down.
Authorizing.
Shut
the-
it down pretty quickly before the public could even come up and say when you said it. So you run your meetings the way you want to, because the public gonna see exactly how you're doing things. So I don't think you're doing it right, but you ought to look at your own parliamentary procedures that you're trying to pass today under the bylaws. That's what it says in there, parliamentary procedures. You're not following them.
I believe we have, but
Well,
thank
you
you very
believe
much.
it, but it's not true.
Sorry, Commissioner, would you please continue?
Okay. Adopt resolution number 15-7296, authorizing the mayor to enter into a members agreement with the Salina Airport Authority, Salina Area Chamber of Commerce, and Saline County to create the Salina Community Economic Development Organization Incorporated. And I believe the only correction or addition we made was to insert the date of December 15, 2015, Section 6, organizational meeting of the board.
Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 15-7296, authorizing the mayor enter into a members agreement with the Salina Airport Authority, Salina Area Chamber of Commerce, and Saline County to create the Salina Community Economic Development Organization Incorporated, and inserting the date of December 15, 2015, under Section 6 of organizational meeting of the board. Okay. Is there any further discussion or comment at this time? I just want to add, as Commissioner Crawford said earlier, I appreciate the hard work that everybody's done to get to this point. I know it was contentious at times, but I think that whenever you're going through changes such as this that are necessary, I think that sometimes you got to go through a little rough patch to get to the clear spot. So I think that we've got a good document with recommendations to move forward. Hopefully everybody, if you haven't had an opportunity to read through those recommendations, that you do so. And just to make it clear that this is an opportunity for the community to move forward on our economic development efforts. As recently as July 2012, we had an economic development plan and target industry study that we had. It came out and it didn't go anywhere. So I say kudos to everybody involved that this one we were able to take and turn it into something productive. And I think that all entities will benefit moving forward. Just one note, I hope that as far as the future funding goes, I appreciate the Airport Authority and the board members here for having a incremental step-up approach to more of a full funding, and that's greatly appreciated. We hope that our counterparts at the county will also see the benefit in supporting this EDO. As the technical assistance document points out from IEDC, the intent is for the EDO to be a regional type economic development player, and sees the role as this EDO to be a leader on the regional scale. And so I think through work with the EDO and organizations like North Central Regional Planning Commission, I think we have an opportunity with full funding in those two organizations to really do great things for the citizens of Salina and Saline County. So thank you to everybody involved. And is there anybody else that'd like to say anything at this time? And seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. Thank you, guys. Also, to anybody making it count, the book that we were given by the IEDC is pretty good. Any of you guys want my highlighted copy, I can make that available to you. Okay, we're moving on to 7.2.
Item 7.2, resolution number 15-7297, making certain findings and determinations, giving authority to the city of Salina, Kansas to partner with Heartland Housing Partners, LLC, and apply for and participate in the Kansas Moderate Income Housing Program.
Okay, Mr. Scragg.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. At the outset, I'd like to acknowledge that you've got a couple of revised documents at your seat. And before I get done, I'll explain the revisions and the need for the revisions. But as you may recall, we were approached by Ross Vogel of Heartland Housing Partners, as well as James Hall on behalf of Applequest Development, about the possibility of partnering for a moderate income market rate apartment project and jointly submitting an application to the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation for moderate income housing grant funding. And so the general description of the project is a 64 multifamily apartment project divided into 24 one-bedroom, 32 two-bedroom, and 8 three-bedroom units, and then including a garage that may be rented, garages that may be rented at additional charge, as well as a clubhouse and community gathering space. Staff made a presentation to you on October 12th in study session and explained that there were really 4 action items that relate to this proposal. One would be a comprehensive plan amendment as relates to future land use related to a proposed site. The second item is land use approval, specifically as it relates to zoning and amendments of a PDD. Thirdly is the possible request for and consideration of a rural housing incentive district. And then fourth is the grant application that's before you today. As you probably recall, as part of that study session presentation, a couple things were noted. Number one, the application deadline for the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation moderate income housing grant was imminent. It's Friday of this week, and so that took a little bit of priority in terms of timing, and that deadline will occur before the other action items could be acted upon. Secondly, there was quite a bit of discussion about the fact that the land use items, the comprehensive plan amendment and the land use approvals, as well as the rural housing incentive district application, were all potentially quasi-judicial matters, which precluded you from discussing the specifics of the land use items for fear that you would disqualify yourself at the time that a public hearing should be conducted. So we were all left in a little bit of an awkward situation of talking about the project and the grant application in concept without going into detail. And at the conclusion of the study session, it was noted that Mr. Vogel and the applicants were fully aware that the land use approvals would have to occur and were not predetermined as part of this grant application. And there was general consensus that it was worth the time and effort for staff to coordinate with the applicant and the developer to prepare an application for your consideration. So that's where we find ourselves today. You have before you a resolution that is a resolution of support to submit the grant application as well as the grant application itself. I would note that the grant application includes a category of whether the property is properly zoned or application for zoning is pending. It's noted that the site is not properly zoned at this time. Requests are pending, and part of the attached submittals will be the applications for the comp plan amendment and land use approvals. The details of the project as well as the funding are included in the grant application, and actually Mr. Vogel or Mr. Hall may be able to speak to the details of that a little bit better than I can, but suffice it to say that there's no bank financing involved. The bulk of the funds are being funded by as indicated on the application, by kind of a combination of Great Plains Rentals, Applequist Properties LP, and QA Applequist Trust. And the grant application also includes details about the annual expenses and revenues projected for the project. So with respect to the application, you received a memo on Friday that noted that additional information was provided and that there was a numeric change in the application. The numeric change was insertion of $175,000 of construction interest charges that were omitted from the original application that was distributed, as well as the inclusion of a number of supplemental items, everything from just a supplemental summary to aerial photos of the location in Salina, as well as the proposed site plan, elevations, and some excerpts that I selected out of the draft housing study to speak to the issue of the need for moderate income housing. I would love to say that it was someone other than myself, but I took a 2-page document and copied it as a 1-page document, and as a result, you got every other page instead of all the pages. So one of the items that you have at your desk is a full and complete memo and attachments. The second item that's at your desk is a red line version of Resolution 157297. And the reason for the red lines, upon further review, staff thought it was probably necessary to refine that to be directed at the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation application and not make overarching statements that might predetermine some of the items that might be considered as part of the Rural Housing Incentive District application that might be pending. So I went back and made the red line edits solely with the intention of refining it more to the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation application and grant without making broad statements about housing needs and the status of housing in Salina. So in light of that, this would be a grant application to the state for $400,000 to provide financial assistance to the Heartland Properties and the developers that identified in the application to construct a moderate rate apartment complex in Salina. As far as the strategic plan, I noted that this could be considered to be consistent with the city's shared vision statement as it relates to it being a city that is exciting to live in and thriving economically and socially, being clean, attractive, and inviting, and that it also could be considered to be consistent with our strategic plan, goal number 1, creating a community of mixed-use quality development and redevelopment, as well as providing high-quality services consistent with the governing body's direction. With respect to the fiscal note, submission of the grant application as well as receive the grant has no direct financial cost to the city. It would involve staff time to administer the grant and coordinate it, but no additional funds are committed to or would have to be expended as part of this grant application. I would note that authorization of a rural housing incentive district, which is a completely separate and distinct item, would have significant financial impacts in the form of redirection of property tax increment. I don't know how much we've talked about RHID and how familiar you are with it, but it might be a little bit of an oversimplification, but I would describe it as tax increment financing of housing. It's an opportunity to capture that property tax increment for an eligible project and redirect it back to the project. So that is not being considered or attached to this action item in any way, but just wanted to make you aware of that. As far as possible options for your consideration, option number 1 would be to approve the resolution 157297, making certain findings and determinations and giving authority to the City of Salina to partner with Heartland Housing Partners and apply for and participate in the Kansas Modern Income Housing Program. Option number 2 would be to postpone consideration of the resolution to a specified date to allow staff and/or the applicant to respond to specific questions. If you're considering that option, I would note that the application deadline to the state is Friday of this week. And then option number 3 is to vote to deny resolution 157297, making certain findings and authorizing the application as a partner with Heartland Housing Partners, and resulting in a grant application not being submitted in 2015. In light of the timing factors related to the grant application deadline and the acknowledgement that future consideration of the quasi-judicial matters of amending the comp plan and the necessary land uses will need to be approved separately and objectively at a future date, staff recommends option number 1 to keep this project moving forward in the eyes of the state.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for staff at this time? I have a bit of a procedural question to ask before because I'd like to get the presentation also from the applicant, but
And it may be my brain is just falling short, but would it be incongruent for us to apply for participate in this action, the KMIHP, if you don't mind my shortening it, yet deciding later that we did not want to amend the comprehensive plan or land use approvals? In other words, would it be obligating ourselves either morally or administratively by joining the application at this point?
I certainly understand the reason for your question. The conclusion of the study session was that would not be the case, and we'd clearly communicate that. And I've made every effort as part of the grant application, as well as my communications with the applicants, to make it clear that nothing is a foregone conclusion as it relates to the comp plan amendment, the land use, or the rural housing incentive district. So it's really just keeping our options open to make application to the state, and the other items will have to run their course. If we had our choice, it certainly would be a lot easier for all of us if the timing were reversed. But given our circumstance, we have said we could proceed this way without obligating ourselves to those other approvals.
So this is merely saying this might be a good idea, but we haven't decided if we want to actually go through with it.
Right. We've tried to communicate in the application that the land use requests will be made, but the outcome is to be determined, in the same way with the rural housing incentive district financing. Frankly, I expect that I'll get a similar question from the state, or there'll be some inquiry from the administrator from the state, and I'll have to clearly explain that here's the timing, application's been made, and nothing's decided at this time.
Okay, and one other question. On page 8, references the jobs. One question in particular catches my interest, the number of jobs that are not being filled because of inadequate housing. Does that page have to be filled in for the application?
It doesn't. In fact, one of the choices is a checkbox of unknown. And so I'm not even sure it's a fair question for the chamber, but I put those questions to the chamber, and depending on their level of comfort and responding to them, we'll incorporate what they're comfortable providing. Otherwise, we'll have to indicate unknown.
Because obviously, if there were a large number of jobs that were felt to be vacant, or slots vacant because of inadequate housing, then I would see the state more likely to give the money.
And like I said, actually, the application calls for letters from employers, and we strategically said we weren't going to be able to secure those, and so we'll either leave it as unknown, or if the chamber is willing to somewhat hazard a guess, I've tried to word that it's an estimate at best.
That's all. Thank you.
What's the definition of moderate income?
Actually, Mr. Vogel may be able to speak to that better than I can, but it's a percentage of the median income, and I think he can speak to the numbers better than I can.
Okay. I think Commissioner Davis's question was kind of along the same lines as mine, and the question I have for you, and maybe even Mr. Bankson, since we utilized you last time, is that in order to preserve the process and objectivity and everything else on future land use items and comp plan items that come down the road, and recognizing the fact that the cart is a bit in front of the horse right now on this because of the deadline Friday. But is there any way we could make a decision? I mean, everything is site-specific, and this application is site-specific. And it's one thing for the state to say, is it proposed for a zone change, and they make their decision to fund it or not fund it based on if that actually happens, and it doesn't really matter if it doesn't happen. But on ours, I think, and the word that struck me that you used there was morally. When we say, well, we'll go along with you so far, but not knowing what's going on down the road, we can't commit to going the full distance. And there's a part in there about the comp plan, but on our goal, our strategic plan and shared vision goals as well. And what happens when a decision to support something contradicts those plans?
I understand the question. I don't know if this helps at all, but the state's application, the checkbox as it relates to this issue contemplates that the zoning's not in place, which to me indicates this is not a new problem from the state's perspective. They have a check. The question, it's one combined question, proper zoning or application for proper zoning. And it's not, you don't have to indicate one or the other. So, and I'm speculating on behalf of the state, but I think that's an acknowledgement from them that they recognize that there are going to be projects that apply to them that are applying for zoning simultaneously or maybe even thereafter. And I don't think it would come as a complete surprise to them if we tell them application's been made for proper zoning and then it's ultimately been denied. That's not ideal, but I think from the state's perspective, it's a possibility. Now, that's just a grant administration answer. That is not a moral answer.
Well, in a way, I think it is, because you really have two audiences here. I mean, you may have more, but you have two primary audiences. You have the Kansas Housing Resources Corp, and it is Mike's correct. It's very clear in the application that the zoning has not yet been approved, and therefore it's out there, and they know that that's a contingency. I think if you would have checked it to say, yeah, it is, not knowing, that would be a moral violation. But I don't believe it is, because the application is very, very clear. With the applicant, it's the same thing. It's being very, very clear about saying, hey, we know just by the timelines that the order isn't typically what you'd like it to be. It's a lot easier to deal with some of the land use stuff first and then come back to the incentive stuff. But because of the timing, at least of this piece, you just don't have that as a luxury. So therefore, being clear with the owner, the applicant, about saying, just because we may approve this, if you should decide to, doesn't in any way cause us to feel obligated to not further critique an RHID or to apply the discretion given to us by state law on how we deal with land use. I think being clear addresses the moral aspect of that. It's being clear what your intent is and what it's not. And as long as they know that, that's all that can be asked of you.
And I was remiss. I should have noted that in the narrative, the description as relates to zoning as well as RHID is that the project is in the process of requesting the necessary zoning and plating approvals. It will also request designation as a rural housing incentive district from the city of Salina. And then later in the application, there's a specific question about rural housing incentive district, and it's worded that to be applied for and to be determined. So we try to do our best to communicate that it's all pending.
Okay, yeah, and I think you have done that effectively. I think the dilemma that is faced is where can a decision or a conversation go that doesn't wander into pre-deciding an action that is upcoming? I.e., let me just put it in this term, since we got a letter here from a citizen that basically was addressing the question in terms of, locations for a potential moderate income housing project. And knowing that demand is not, I mean, there is demand, but it's not limitless. And where do you put these? So is any discussion whatsoever on alternative locations or preferences that are laid out in the strategic plan? As far as, and I'll just be general here, looking towards downtown or the city core versus other areas. Is there, would you be wandering into tricky territory talking about it in terms of, in those terms?
It's a good question. I always look at Greg for those answers. Maybe I should ask this of Greg too, kind of taking your question and maybe modifying a little bit. But for example, let's say that as a governing body, you have certain economic development goals, and housing is part of the economic development goals. And we've talked a lot about downtown and the core. And I'm just throwing this out. I'm not trying to get you to agree or disagree. But if you say, hey, our emphasis is in the downtown right now for economic development purposes versus somewhere else, my initial take on that is it doesn't take you down a predetermination from a comprehensive plan or land use perspective. It's about your economic development goals. But that's an example. I would offer that up to Greg to see what his thoughts are on that, because it is important that we keep you as far away from anything that causes you to predetermine from a land use perspective.
Okay.
Predetermination is, of course, a concern either way, either a predetermination in favor or a predetermination against this application that we know will be coming forward. The quasi-judicial aspect is triggered by virtue of the specificity of the site. You're applying applicable law as well as factual determinations to that specific site. I don't know that I can sit here and draw the black letter line, but I'm sure you're ahead of me. The extent to which we can get away from that specific site, we know that is not anywhere you want to go. To the extent we can get away from that and then but speak in as general terms as you can, but realizing that there could be some distinctions that you would want to make as you look at the entire community, I think you're in safe ground as long as you're speaking conceptually of those considerations, if that is helpful. As long as we can get away, as long as we can keep away from that specific site, we are increasingly safe as you become more general.
We don't have that
not
we don't have
specific
that
enough.
luxury in this instance,
Yeah,
though, right?
That specific site is tied to this resolution.
It is, but I think, and then possibly we need some acknowledgement from the applicant, that the applicant is asking you to make this consideration at entirely the applicant's risk of the fact that in order for this to have any prospect of advancement, it has to be on the basis that you have absolute, total discretion when the ultimate land use question posed through the comprehensive plan amendment and the zoning amendment comes before you. It just cannot be any other way.
Okay.
I understand that, but, and without necessarily implying that it's decided one way or the other, if, you know, agreeing to do this, knowing that I might not want to approve an incentive district or something like that down the road would seem to be a fruitless effort if it's going to meet a roadblock at the next step.
But I don't want to speak for the applicant, but if you, or the state for that matter, but if you go ahead and approve this and we're awarded a grant by the state, and then the planning approvals ultimately are denied, I don't, you know, while that's unfortunate, I don't think that's going to come as a complete surprise to the state. And from the applicant's perspective, if you approve this, we get the grant application, and you don't want to approve RHID later, the onus will be on them to rework their numbers and see if this is still a project they want to pursue.
Okay. Well, you know what? Why don't we go ahead and hear from the applicant? And then that way, maybe some of those questions can be fleshed out, and some of the other ones as well, and we'll learn a little bit more. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Ross Vogel, Heartland Housing Partners, 4740 Roanoke Parkway, Kansas City, Missouri. First of all, I want to thank staff. They've worked really hard with us to get this done on an expedited timeline. I want to thank Mike and entire staff. I think, first of all, what's a little bit interesting is that you just had economic development right before this, and when I give my talk, I get asked to talk about this issue because we're one of the few people, if any, doing market rate in rural communities. I talk about economic development. This is about economic development. This is, I come to Salina and I'm 28 years old and I don't have a place to live that's desirable to me, even though I have a great job. And a good friend of mine's father lives here as a business leader, and I hadn't stopped by, but I stopped by just a minute ago, or right before I came here, and said, yeah, we're working on this apartment project. I said, man, we haven't had one of those in like 20 years. And so I think it's a real issue here. So let's keep that in mind, that we're talking about growth, and this is a key element to that. Quality of life. You guys talked about quality of life. This is about quality of life. I think the biggest factor, as I said here today, is this is a dream scenario. And I don't use that lightly. 18 months ago when I first walked in Gary's office, if I had the scenario that is in front of you today, I would have been like, man, I can't believe it. Now I wish it would have been a little quicker, Gary, but I'd said, man, I can't believe it. Even 4 weeks ago when we talked to you all, besides the dream scenario of the Royals winning the World Series, which a big comeback was going on during that game, this is a dream scenario. You have what I view to be a great site. You have a good project that's right-sized for your community. And the biggest thing is you have a local group that is willing to step up and make that investment in your community. And I would tell you that of every community that qualifies for an MIH grant, there's not one in the state that wouldn't, not because it's me, trust me, what I do is not the big part of it. There's not one community in the state that wouldn't want to trade positions with you right now if they could be applying for a grant with what we're going to set forth on Friday, if you approve it today. It is going to be an extremely strong application. Having experience, every time I've applied for one of these, I've gotten it. And we've scored very well. I feel really, really, really strongly about this application. A couple things that I'll mention that we can probably take some of these things off the table. I know there's some legal, I'm not an attorney. Sometimes I talk like one, but I'm not. Every time that we've put one of these applications in before, we have not had either zoning or rural housing incentive district approval. I'd have to go back and check dates. I know at least 3 of those 4, and I think 4 of those 4. I was trying to set back there. So this is not unprecedented water by any means. I will tell you this RHID section of the application, that's new. They want to see that you've looked at every avenue. The folks at the Kansas Housing Resources, they know how hard it is to make these work, and they want to see that they work, and they want to see that the community's taken every avenue to look at, and the developer and everybody's taken every avenue to make them work financially. You had a question about what is moderate income housing. I don't want to get confused. This is a straight market rate. This will be the nicest thing in town. This is just an avenue to help make the numbers work. Because I'll tell you, when I walk into an investor meeting, it's not very much fun to go, this is a real marginal returning deal. But every time I walk into one, that's what I say. Area median income is what they base it off of. And they base it off actually the state's area median income. 150% of area median income in Kansas is $69,000 and some change for one person. For 2 people, it's $79,000 and some change. For 4, it's on up in the 90s. So that's a really high benchmark. The other thing is we would be applying for the grant to 14 of the 64 units. They won't realize they're in that. It's basically a yearly reporting. That particular tenant wouldn't realize they're in. What I will tell you right now is that I know out of those 64 units that 14 of those will definitely fit within that income range. Addressing just general location. Been looking at Salina for 2 years. Know what you guys have going on downtown. I mentioned this when we met in the study session a couple of weeks or 4 weeks ago. These, because they haven't been done, are very difficult to finance. From an appraisal perspective, they're difficult to finance. I also mentioned that my wife and I live in an urban environment. I love urban projects. Mayor, you and I talked about it when we sat down and talked that night. I love urban projects.
Mr. Ross?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you anticipating speaking about the proposed location of your project?
If you'd like me to.
I don't want you to.
I wasn't going to.
Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry. I thought from your introductory statement that when you mentioned your site, I was concerned that you were going there. So I'm sorry.
I'm actually going to downtown.
Okay. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No problem whatsoever. I appreciate you keeping me, because I am not an attorney, and I appreciate that. Can you just follow me around all the time everywhere I talk? It'd be extremely helpful. Yeah, not all the time.
We keep them busy.
Yeah, that's right. I have great hopes that downtown, to be successful, has to have people and has to have rooftops. And I hope this project is a precursor to that, is basically what I'll get to about that. And a precursor to being able to show the market that, hey, we can attain the kind of rents that are needed to make a project work here in Salina.
Okay. Questions for?
In the final analysis, though, a project is placed where the landowner wants to put it, not necessarily because it would be nice to have it downtown.
That's not what happened. Well, okay.
So you have land, you say, oh, I think this would be a good spot for 64 units. Let's figure out a way to make it happen.
That's not what happened in this case. And another part, I said dream scenario. The dream scenario, and when I walk into a community, I mean, it is I said 2 weeks ago in McPherson, we did a ribbon cutting. And I kind of said what I just said. I said, listen, what the bankers did and what I did and what the construction guys did, we're all working our tails off, and we're doing a great job, and we're doing best to make the best project we can, and we are. But without the funding source, this project wouldn't be possible. That's really the hard part. So when I go into a community, and this is not the first community I've done this, the funding source to be able to own this project, fund it construction-wise, own it long-term, is what I'm always concerned about. Certainly I'm concerned about getting approvals from the community. Certainly I'm concerned about location. Certainly, But if we don't find that funding source, it doesn't matter what we do. In this case, the area that we'd like to see this go was out of experience on my part, where I felt strongly that it would work best, be most financeable, and then the rest was totally luck. The landowner didn't approach me, or vice versa, or the landowner didn't approach me. I said, hey, I'd love to talk to you about your property, and the rest is history, and that's great luck for the community, quite frankly.
When I look at this application, couple questions. One, when you're talking about the funding information, the use of the 400,000, you have one as a gap filler. One of the boxes checked is for a gap filler. Is that?
Yeah, well, it's terminology used by the state.
Right.
So a lot of this, we could sit here and talk all day, and I'm glad to if you want to. This is the tax credit program. This comes out of the same office. So they use a lot of that same language. I'm assuming that's a language that those folks use, and it's in here. And so gap filler means, hey, we'd like to do this project, but the numbers really aren't that good. Well, it's a gap filler. So we said, yeah, this is gap filler, just like anything else.
Okay.
So.
And then just the other thing I had a question on was on the section under leveraging. And there's your equity investor
Mhm.
is listed one, the possibility of RHID funds to take down real estate taxes is listed as another one. And the third one, that attain employer unit guarantees from large employers. What can you tell us about that?
Once again, this is language that leveraging is one of those state government terms when it comes to housing, or federal terms when it comes to housing. And I don't get on that world, so I don't want to speak much to it.
Mm-hmm.
But leverage, they want to see that the community's leveraged everything they can to make the project work. So we'll go out to employers and say, hey, will you guarantee a certain number of units for your employees? I'm not saying that will work, but we've done that in other communities and it has been successful. So
On the rents, though, on these things, will there be rent breaks for employees of employers that give guarantees?
no. I mean, it's to be negotiated, as we said here. Once again, we want to make that look as attractive to these folks as possible.
Right.
We want to speak their language. We also want to show that the community is 100% behind it, too.
Okay, well, those were the questions I had for
Okay.
that were not site-specific.
I was going to ask Gary, in the survey, were there people who wanted, I was kind of surprised there was 8 3-bedroom units, because I would think 1 or 2 bedroom would be needed, but I just wondered if 3
In the housing
bedrooms.
study you're referring to, was there questions about available units? Yes, there were some questions about, do you have available units in a price range that would fit into moderate income? And the answers were, they were limited within our community, but yes, there was people who desired that type of a market.
3 bedrooms are real interesting. You might have one person living in it. It's just a...
Yeah, it's kind of,
And given that you have a community that this is going to be the project for at least the time being, where, you know, there's transitional, there's rent by choice now. So it's interesting. I think I mentioned this before. If we were looking at this project 18 months ago, we'd be looking at more twos than we have ones. Millennials have really started to drive the market, and they don't want to live with other people, apparently, among other things, I think. But one thing I'll add, unless you don't have any questions. Do you have any more questions for me? Okay, sorry.
It really wasn't about the finance. Looking at the picture in here of the Terra Nova apartments in McPherson, is there, and then looking at the conceptual diagram here, is there much green space or just space for walking around? I don't want to use the word park space, but
Remember, that's a work in progress. We have decided, since we did that, we are going to have much more green space actually in the project. We still need to get with our architect and work through those details. But there will be much more green space than we, I wouldn't say anticipated. Ownership said, hey, we want more green space. And we said, you bet. Some owners, depends on where we are, some want efficiency, some want green space. This one wants green space.
Because it didn't look like there was any at the one in McPherson, and on this diagram, it didn't look like there was space for much on this one. And
Once again, we try to do what the owner wants to do at the end of the day. And sometimes that's green space, sometimes it's flexibility, or some efficiency. Excuse me.
Okay. Any more questions? No. Thank you.
Just one quick thing, you
Okay,
know,
I'm sorry. Go
they being the committee that reviews these, they want to see a consolidated solidarity throughout the community of supporting these, because it's extremely competitive. But having said that, if you all pass this, this will be a really, really strong application. Thank you.
Mr. Vogel, I did have one procedural question. In light of the other partners, you think it's okay to say it's in partnership with Heartland Housing Partners, or should we list all of?
I think Heartland's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any public comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back up to the commission for any further discussion and possible motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve resolution number 157297, making certain findings and determinations, giving authority to the City of Salina to partner with Heartland Housing Partners LLC and apply for and participate in the Kansas Moderate Income Housing Program.
second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 15-7297, making certain findings and determinations, giving authority to the City of Salina, Kansas to partner with Heartland Housing Partners LLC and apply for and participate in the Kansas Moderate Income Housing Program. Motion and a second. Is that reflected in the red line version? I mean, would that be-
Yes, that's the intention, is the red line version is your most current
Is the most
version of the
current.
resolution.
Okay. Okay, is there any further discussion at this
Yeah,
time?
I'm just still concerned about the back pressure that puts on the next board that has to, or the next body that has to review anticipated requests for changing a plan, which we have a comprehensive plan, but it never seems to stand for anything because it never seems to be adhered to.
Mhm.
And, I mean, it's just an idle observation from up here, but.
Not site specific at all.
You know,
If I may briefly, Mayor, that I know it's a tough line to draw, but I know you all are intellectually capable of distinguishing the two, and everyone just has to trust that that's what you're doing. And I think the applicant knows that that's part of the picture, and everyone that can sit here and tell you how you should think about this knows that that is often difficult, but it is much like I referred to the judge explaining to the jury that they should disregard that testimony. You don't know where it's going to be for all practical purposes now and not until that comprehensive plan amendment and zoning application comes before you.
I
If
will
it's-
count on your reminding us of that at least 10 times in the future.
Well, yeah, actually, that's what I was going to say. If it's helpful at all, staff certainly would be proactive, and given the deliberations in the study session and today and the conversations we had with the applicant, I have no reservations being very clear and very blunt in the staff reports to the other bodies, so that they have an understanding of the way we've handled this.
Ready for the question?
Okay, yeah, I was just looking for the section on here because, I mean, just to reiterate this kind of one more time, because it is a little hard to wrap your head around, as you, I think, said, the incongruities in this thing. But the resolution is, just reread the resolution. A resolution making certain findings and determinations, giving authority to the City of Salina, Kansas to partner with Heartland Housing Partners LLC and apply for and participate in the Kansas moderate income housing program. And then down on section 5, it does tie the specific property to the application and so on. Is it reasonable to suggest that the findings that we're referring to are the ones section 1 through 6 would be what you'd be describing as findings and determinations?
I believe so,
Well,
but
I guess it-
which reference to findings and
Well,
determinations
section 1,
are
2,
you-
and 3 at least, based on the findings, yeah. And the red lines on those are, the explanation of those is to,
target Kansas
Target
Housing
more
Resource Modern Income Grant only.
okay. All right, well,
Section 5 does specifically identify this location, correct?
it does.
From the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation's perspective, I don't think we have the option of just having a community-wide application. So doing the intellectual exercise that Mr. Bankson described, we're going to have to submit site-specific to KHRC, knowing that the land use considerations are pending.
You know, if the land use was changed, I mean, I would be the last person to want to deny them getting $400,000 that, you know, sitting on the table to take. It's just, some parts of the logic that my brain likes to follow seems very, just, this friction in my head right now just doesn't seem the right way to go about doing this. Or it seems like we are really obligating ourselves for a future action here.
Can I ask another quick question? And
Yes.
I was just curious about whether comprehensive plans in general tend to be more static or more of an evolving kind of thing.
Comprehensive plans can be amended, but there's a general premise behind the comprehensive plan that hopefully would be upheld as part of those amendments. So as you look at an area, a geographic area, you need to apply good planning principles to amend the comp plan. It's not haphazard. But those will be part of the considerations, that'll be part of the staff report, that'll be part of the criteria that the staff provides at that time.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, I have the motion and second to approve the resolutions. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? No?
Nay.
Okay, that does carry 3-2. Okay, thank you all. Okay. Are we on 7-3 now? Okay. Okay.
Item 7.3, resolution number 15-7298, authorizing the mayor to execute a compliance agreement with George Meinhardt, providing for an extension of time to repair or remove the designated dangerous structure located at 906 North 11th.
Okay. Trying to find my sheet here again. Someone want to help me? Thank you, Mr. Brown, for helping me out. This is Mr. Brown.
You're quite welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. This evening, we're bringing to you resolution number 15-7298, and give you a bit of brief history. I know we have brought several of these to you in the last few weeks. On April 27th, governing body adopted resolution 15-7213, declaring the structure at 906 North 11th to be unsafe and dangerous. This resolution established a commence date of May 11, 2015, a substantial completion date of June 11, 2015. And this deadline, in this case, was based upon the owner's presentation at that particular meeting to the City Commission and his plans to renovate this property. There's a timeline provided in your sheet, and as you notice that May, June, July, September, very little activity has occurred, if any. One thing to note, on September 11, 2015, as part of our site visit, it was noticed that someone had apparently tried to gain entry into this property, thus reinforcing the attractive nuisance clause as it applies to dangerous structures. And we have had no communication from the owner during this time until October 11, 2015, received a phone call. And also to note, on August 17, 2015, a demolition contract, specifically demolition DS 15-001, was awarded to Excel Dirt and Excavation for the demolition of 5 structures. This particular demolition contract contained 5 structures, this being one of the structures. One of the criteria on this demolition contract was the fact that we've had no communication. No one seems to be interested in rehabbing this property during that time. So it was logical at the time with the deadline provided that this would be one that would go into a demolition contract. And again, being that we had no conversation until October 11th, after this call, staff met with the owner and discussed his plans to renovate the property. And the owner was informed multiple times during this meeting that resolution number 15-7213 had run its course. We had awarded a demolition contract for the property, and that there would be a cost involved to buy out the demolition contract. The owner informed staff at that time that he had hired a property manager to oversee renovations for the house, and he and a contractor that he had association with had determined this house would be a good candidate for renovation. Now, on November the 2nd, the owner informed staff that a new property manager had been hired. The previous property manager had been fired. And we contacted this new property manager to schedule a meeting to discuss this particular project, this particular house. At the conclusion of that meeting, it was instructed that the property manager was to obtain cost estimates for the renovation, provide a timeline, specific steps to complete the renovation. This information was also to be provided by staff by Friday, November 6, 2015. The new property manager, Mr. Casio, requested entry to 906 North 11th on November the 6th to evaluate the property and make a determination whether it was worthy for him to renovate the property or not. And it was also brought to his attention on November the 9th, actually, on November the 9th today, we received a request in writing to begin work on November the 23rd and complete work no later than January the 2nd as necessary to move the structure from the dangerous structures listing. This request in writing came from the property manager, the new property manager, Mr. Casio, and it reflects the information that's shown in the compliance agreement. It was also made aware that the failure to do so would result in withdrawal of this plan to renovate, and the city would move forward with demolition without delay. As we noted, as November the 2nd, our hard costs, and there are hard costs involved in this property. Of course, we have a buyout for a demolition contract plus other costs. The cost for our reports, our certified mailings, our asbestos testing to date, $1,087.77, plus our demolition buyout costs, which was confirmed by a demolition contractor of $4,000, is a total of $5,087.77, which is reflected in our compliance agreement that we're prepared as a non-refundable and is full payment. In addition, the owner must also deposit with the city a financial guarantee of $2,750. The actual bid to demolish this house was $6,200. So this $2,750 is a result of 125% of that $2,200 balance that's still outstanding, so that the funding is there in case the owner fails to do what is shown in the compliance agreement. The funding is there for the city to use these funds to complete the demolition of this property. I think Mr. Cario is present, and he may answer any questions that you may have at this time. Also noting that at the beginning, the staff report had one change to it, and I believe that was provided to you. As it addresses commission action number 1, that was the only change. I highlighted that in yellow, and that's the only change that we had to the staff report. And the options provided to you is, number 1, approve resolution number 15-7298, approving the proposed compliance agreement to establish a date of November 23rd, 2015 to commence work and a date of January 2nd, 2016 to complete work, provided that the compliance agreement is executed and the required payment of the city's costs as well as financial guarantees are received no later than 5 p.m. Friday, November 13th, 2015. Work shall include all repairs and renovations necessary to complete work necessary to remove the structure from the dangerous structures listing, and authorizing staff to proceed with the demolition if the owner fails to comply. Number 2, approve resolution number 15-7298 is indicated in option 1, but fixing alternative reasonable times. Or 3, deny further extension and cause the structure to be demolished under the present contract agreement with Excel Dirt and Excavation. At this particular time, staff recommends alternative number 3. There appears there are still no extenuating circumstances related to the original deadline. The city is already under contract for this demolition, and there's been no evidence of diligent prosecution. However, as I said, the new property manager is here this evening to speak to that end and may have additional information to share with the commission.
If I may add one thing, Mr. Brown did a great job, especially in light of the complexity of this and the tag team nature of it. But there's one other piece of information that some of you may already be aware of, and that is the owner, Mr. Meinhardt, showed up on the booking report on Friday, and so he is incarcerated for probation violations. I don't know his status beyond that, and so part of the reason that we took the approach of payment being due on a specified date is whether his property manager, whether his contractor, whether someone else can effectuate payment on his behalf. The expectation would be that if we're paid, we can enter into the compliance agreement.
One question, is the financial security deposit 125% of just the additional demolition cost, or that
Yes,
plus
sir,
the
that's correct.
$5,000?
It's only applicable to the additional, to what's not already invoked as a hard cost, which it would be 125% of the 2,200,
So
which
there's
is the remaining amount of the demolition contract if the city has to demolish the structure.
So he's not being asked to place a security
$5,000.
deposit for the money the city would have to eat if it buys out the contract?
If they fail on the compliance agreement to perform per the compliance agreement, then the funding that is remaining on that would be utilized to do the demolition. If, in fact, they do meet the conditions of the compliance contract, the amount of $2,750 would be refunded back to the owner applicant.
He doesn't have to write a check for $5,087 to start out
That's a
with.
given. That's the hard cost that must be done.
Okay, that's what I,
And it's non-refundable.
all right, I wasn't sure I saw that specifically stated. That's what I assumed from the other cases, just wanted to
Yes.
make sure,
Well,
okay.
well, let me
Thank you.
clarify on the potential actions, the list. In light of what Mr. Sprague added there, would 1 and 3 be ultimately the same if payment isn't made by 5 p.m. Friday, November 23rd?
Yes. If you were to enact number 1 and payment wasn't received, it would be conditioned such that the compliance agreement would not be executed.
Was number 1 changed?
Yes.
And so does staff recommendation still stand at number 3, or is staff?
Number 1 did change in light of his recent arrest, and his recent arrest is just one more thing to add to the list of reasons that are in number 3.
So number 3 would, okay.
Yeah, Commissioners, the main reason for number 3 is when you look at this, and you've dealt with an extenuating circumstance, I won't get into it for privacy of the person who's involved on one of these, but in essence, being high on drugs for a period of time, totally disregarding everything, not taking responsibility, allowing the building to get like that, and then coming in after the contract is put together with the demolition contractor doesn't appear to even resemble any form of diligent prosecution or effort or caring whatsoever. The thought being is that early on, you have an initial contact with the development services and someone will know what they need to do. Eventually, if they don't do it, it gets to you and you give your order that it's dangerous, and eventually we'll come back with a final action or two that says, hey, here's your date, you got to get it taken care of, or it's getting torn down. And they can still come in, and I think it's okay there's a point at which it fits in the process, and it's a point at which you're actually given grace and forgiven along the way. But I don't think, unless there's a true extenuating circumstance, it's a good habit to get into forgiving after we're under contract with the demolition contractor, because there may be a point in time first of all, we don't know what the target is, but there may be a point in time in the future that the demolition contractor doesn't see the humor in it anymore, and you can't find a demolition contractor to work for you. Because each time that happens, we are under contract. It's a little difficult to deal with. This time, the demolition contractor has been very gracious. And perhaps they may see the benefit of taking money from someone without having to do anything in the future, and that's a possibility. But if we ever get on the back side of that and people say, I don't want them going back and forth, we could have an issue. It's just not a good business practice once you're under contract to be going back to the contractor and say, can we modify this? That's the main reason. And in this case, we didn't see a real extenuating circumstance. So certainly, if you want to go forward, we'll make it work for you and do it. Make sure that happens. But it's a bad habit at that point to just deal with it at that stage. I think any time before that is perfectly fine, but at that stage, it's pretty tough to deal with. But certainly, like I said, we'll make it work for you if that's where you want to be.
Okay. Are there any more questions for staff? I'd like to hear from the gentleman that came to speak to this issue, and I appreciate you guys being here. But if you want to just come on, and if you would, just give your name and address for so the clerk can get it in the record, please.
My name is Elwin Ocasio. I'm at 731 Joni Lane, Salina, Kansas, 67401. And I'm nervous. Good afternoon, gentlemen, ma'am.
Well, let me just ask you,
Yes, sir.
get you started. I'll just ask you a couple questions. When we're up here talking about what Mr. Meinhardt had, the different times that he had, the amount of time he had to do his stuff, when was it that you came on board with him in this process?
November 2nd, I gave him my card. November 4th, he gave me a call. He went ahead and retained me for his property, especially this one. I can find out that he was on his way to jail, so I jumped on it, try to help him out. So does that answer your question?
Well, it does, and probably more directly, the question would be that what we're looking at here is we're given a date of November.
23rd.
It's coming up. The date isn't the date coming up to
Yes.
by Friday. By this Friday, 5,700 and. Are you going to be able to post a check for 5,700 and whatever that?
Our plan, because it has been, as you've seen, a long time standing, not taken care of. Our plan is to get him to get us the money, set up an account for him, and make sure this property is taken care of. If at any point he doesn't go to our plan, then me and the contractor will come to the city and suggest that it go ahead and be demolished. We don't want to keep this house any longer in bad standing. We would like to bring it back. Personally, I wouldn't want to see a house demolished in my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my goal, to maybe get him. Maybe he needs taken care of. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
So if I can jump in there and take charge of it, get a certain amount of money, and do it all for him, and keep that house up, and the neighborhood to see that the house got brought back.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor, could I ask a quick question?
Please do.
When you say that you engaged him today, is that a verbal commitment, or did he actually sign a contract with you?
He did not sign a contract with me. Verbal commitment.
Just as clarification, we're throwing out a 5,000 number, but the total payment that would need to be received would be $7,837.77. $5,087.77 is payment that is non-refundable, it's payment for expenses. $2,750 is this financial security that would be refundable if the conditions are met in
Right.
terms of repair.
Right. Would I be right in, it sounds like you aren't going to have the ability to write out that 7,000 whatever check in the next.
I think I can get it this week to the city, and if it's the case does not allow me that, then again, we will thank you for your time and suggest to proceed with demolition. I think I can get it from them, and get everything done this week.
Okay.
This was very short notice, and
Well, we've been dealing with them since April 27th.
very long notice.
So-
It was very short notice to me, and I'm trying.
Right,
know.
and we all appreciate that.
Now, to be clear, that would be you're getting the money from Mr. Meinhardt, not your own
Yes,
money
from
as
Mr.
if you were part owner of the property.
Mhm.
Right.
And along with that, I'll have the money for the city and the money for the account. And if we can't work that out within a time frame, then I'll back off.
Okay.
Are you with a real estate agency or?
No, I'm not.
But are you a realtor or?
No, ma'am.
Because he had said something about he'd put his property in the hands of a realtor, so.
Well, I think
thought maybe-
property management, are you property
I'm just a
manager?
property manager.
Okay.
Are you gonna be doing the work on the property?
It was with Christie Copus before.
Oh, that's right, that's right, I think he said.
$2,000 for the house, so he fired him.
Okay.
Commissioner, your question? I'm sorry.
Are you gonna be able are you doing the work, and are you gonna be able to complete that by that January date?
If you have questions about that, I can answer that for you.
Yeah,
This
go
is
ahead
my
and come on up
contractor.
and, yeah, we need to just have you
I tell you
talking to
what I
Mike,
did was
so-
like, I just went with him and kind of looked through the house and tried to decide whether it would be cheaper. And that was one thing I asked him earlier is there, what condition are they gonna leave the soil in upon demolition? Because right now, if they just dig a hole and they don't compact it back, you can't put a house in there unless it has a basement. It's a flood area, so wouldn't be a good idea to put a basement back in there probably. So I was trying to establish, it might just be cheaper for George to let them demolish the house and build a new one. You're gonna have more value that way. Or if, because I didn't realize at the time when I was over there, that he's already paying $5,000 and some dollars that's non-refundable.
Right.
Which I wasn't aware of that at the time, so I gave him kind of an estimate of what it cost just to fix the things on the list and get it back to where it is rentable for a $450 a month kind of person, which easily could be done within 2 weeks. Permit-wise, it's gonna take, we're gonna have to get on the ball though, because the permit's gonna take longer than the actual little bits of work that needs to be done to that house to get it back to livable. I would actually say, get it back livable, do some more stuff to it, and he agreed, and we actually wrote something up for George that, you know, he's gonna have to have $10,000 in an account. He's also gonna have you guys paid in full by Friday to know that, because like I told him, I'm like, you know, if he's taking this long with you guys, if he doesn't have any money in an account that is signed, where checks to be signed by him, I wouldn't want to be involved in it. So I guess what it came down to was I gave him my expertise on what it's going to cost to fix it. The people I'm going to use will be, you know, normal contractors. You know, you're going to have to, because the electrical's not hooked up, the HVAC is not hooked up, and none of those, they're going to have to both be brand new stuff. So pretty much, you know, if there's not $10,000 there to work with, just at least hook the house back up. It's going to be cold and everything's going to be ruined. So he's got 17, and I do know George, and I know that he gets a good chunk of money every month from his inheritance, and that's why you see him driving around expensive stuff all the time and fighting in court. But
Is it possible to do business with Mr. Meinhardt between now and Friday?
yes, if he's in jail, we just have to go have him. He's going to have to sign power of attorney, and he's going to have to sign. That's why we want.
So you have access to him?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I mean, basically, he's gonna have to put money in that account. We're gonna go create an account. He'll have to transfer money to that account, which he can do or his brother can do, because he has a brother that's also not he doesn't own these properties, but his brother has monies from the trust also. So, but that's where they come up with their money. I mean, it's Meinhardt's dad was, well, I'm sure you guys probably know him. He passed away years ago, but he developed most of that out there by like a Huntington area and all that. Wildcat
Right.
Circle, I think, is part of his too. But all that was actually owned by, I think, some of the Meinhardts or something. So
Yeah, I think they just
Is this his
recently
boyhood
sold.
home, or you know?
What's that?
Is this his boyhood home, or do you know?
No, this is nothing like that. It's just
Okay.
a house that he forgot about for 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
We can tell.
I don't know what else to tell you. That's the truth.
Well, let me just ask a quick question for Mike. So the 7,000 would cover paying off the thing and then any cost of demolition.
Right.
Let me transition over here. How close? If Friday comes and there's nothing here, is our demo contractor still? Is this still in the schedule to go originally the way it was?
It is in the schedule to proceed until you make that decision today and we get our money on Friday. It'll still be in the schedule within the next 2 weeks to be demolished. He has one other house he's working on right now, the second one this week, and then he'll be ready to go on our last 2 houses.
If I may, I need to speak to the numbers, one more issue, and Mr. Hobby may be able to elaborate. The 2750 is our best guess based on our conversations with the contractor. If things play themselves out in the next 60 days, that's probably the number. If things drag out, we're still subject to whatever cost the demolition contractor might charge us. So we would have the bulk of that covered, and we would be able to assess the remainder against the property.
Okay.
Can I say something on that, sir, Mayor? That 2,700 is at 125%, so that should allow
Right.
for any
That's
worries.
a good
in
point.
that.
That's the reason for the 125%.
So it shouldn't be an issue.
That would be correct.
Okay. Well, do we have any other questions for?
I had one question, would be, if we follow through with this, and when we get this done, and George takes care of it, which is gonna cost the taxpayers less money? To have it demolished, and then you have a lot that's gonna be trashed and crazy looking there because George won't take care of it? Or is it gonna if we can actually salvage this thing by Friday, which it may happen, it may not happen. Like you said, it'll still go forward if they demolish it, which is gonna save the taxpayers more money. That's kind of one of my question would be for you guys, is what route that would take for you guys?
Well, our preference always is that anything that's redeemable,
Yeah,
that it be brought back into productive use.
okay,
All the taxes brought up current and everything else. So it's always within our issue now is that we're a little gun shy. We've been dealing with this since April
Understand.
27th. And it does, here's the thing, here's our dilemma. It does set a bad example as we try to do this moving forward. I'm kind of more leaning towards if it doesn't make a difference between now and Friday on this particular structure, these applicants or representatives of the applicants are if they can get it by Friday and get the check in, I like that because you know what? It does help to maintain that structure. Also, it gets you guys a little bit of, if we're talking economic development here, a little bit of
Right.
economic development.
well, it puts the
happening.
money back you guys get your stuff paid for
Right.
too.
But, it's,
Might take 6 years to get it
the
otherwise.
the way I'm seeing it is that it's Friday, and if we're covered on our per square footage cost now that we know what we can contract for. I don't like that we keep moving the bar back, but I think if you guys hadn't come into here today, it most definitely would have been go. I wish you guys would have showed up several months ago, then we wouldn't be here today.
Right.
But
Well, my hopes is to do good with him, with this house, and take over all his properties. and not let this happen anymore. And I've talked to, I'm nervous still.
Mr. Hobby.
Mr. Hobby, about other projects around the town that maybe I can start getting into. And I've been in Salina about 4 years, and there's a lot of beautiful properties and a lot of abandoned properties within those neighborhoods that would really be a nice thing to start seeing those houses being brought back. And this is an example. This is a great house. It's not in a terrible shape. It can be brought back very easily.
Okay. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Hey, thanks, guys, for
Mayor and
coming.
Commissioners, just for your
Sure.
information, this happens to be Kevin Christensen, is a contractor in a local community. All he needs to do is get his insurance part back to speed, and then he'll be ready to go as far as being able to do the construction work on the project.
Okay. Great. Okay, thank you, guys, again. Okay, is there any public comment on this? Okay, I'm not seeing any, and so we'll bring it back up for action.
I move that we approve resolution number 15-7298, approving the proposed compliance agreement to establish a date of November 23, 2015 to commence work and a date of January 2, 2016 to complete work, provided that the compliance agreement is executed and the required payment of the city's cost as well as financial guarantees are received no later than 5 p.m. Friday, November 13, 2015. Work shall include all repairs and renovations necessary to complete work necessary to remove the structure from the dangerous structures listing and authorizing staff to proceed with the demolition if the owners fail to comply.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 15-7298 as moved by Commissioner Hardy. Okay, any further discussion?
Did somebody second?
Yeah, we got 2 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 5-0. Okay, thank you. And we'll see if Mr. Meinhardt can come through for these gentlemen and move on from there on Friday at that point. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to development business.
Item 8.1, application Z08-10A, requesting approval of an amendment to an existing PC5 district and the approval of a final site development plan for proposed hotel with a building height of 61 feet. 8.1A, first reading, ordinance number 15-10811. 8.1B, declare compelling public interest exists to allow first and second reading of the ordinance on the same day. And 8.1C, second reading, ordinance number 15-10811.
Okay, Mr. Andrew, staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We've given you quite a bit of background on Riffle Addition Number 2, this corridor. This is an area that used to be owned by KDOT and was an exit ramp that exited off I-135. Mr. Riffle converted it into a commercial subdivision. This property is part of a planned commercial district with underlying zoning of C5 that was approved back in 2008. The hotel that's being proposed is 33,000 square feet. It would contain 99 hotel rooms, 6,600 square feet of meeting space. The required parking would be 230 spaces. They have provided 262 parking spaces on the plan. The current development limitations in place need to be amended in order to construct a 61-foot tall hotel in this location. This requires both Planning Commission and City Commission action and a formal amendment of Ordinance 08-10479, which established the zoning and development limitations for this property. So the two exceptions that are being requested by the applicant, one is an exception to the building height limit of 50 feet to allow a building height of 61 feet. The other exception is that part of the emphasis of the South 9th Street Corridor Overlay District was to create an attractive building finishes and streetscape along South 9th Street, and one of the requirements is that the main entry to primary buildings face 9th Street, and so they are requesting an exception to that to allow the hotel to be oriented north towards Todd Circle. There's 355 feet of building frontage along Todd Circle, 123 feet along 9th Street. The building would be set back 96 feet from 9th Street. This front portion here is 43 feet tall, and the hotel portion is 61 feet 4 inches at the peak of the pitched roof. The primary facade materials would be pre-manufactured cast stone on the ground floor and a combination of stone and dry-vit stucco above that, with dry-vit stucco on the 4th floor. The Planning Commission found that the proposed east-facing building elevation would demonstrate a high quality of visual appearance. They reviewed the landscaping, they reviewed the parking, they reviewed the signage, and on the 20th of October, they voted 9-0 to recommend approval of the application, including the 2 exceptions requested. They also approved the site development plan as proposed. Their findings were that the building height limit was justified by the unique ceiling heights for Hilton Garden Inn, the pitched roof design, and other features and amenities that would be provided for this project. And they found that an exception for the front entrance facing 9th Street was justified by the overall design and appearance of the hotel and conference center buildings, which do demonstrate a high quality visual appearance. So this comes to you with a recommendation for approval by the Planning Commission in order to expedite the issuance of a building permit and to allow work to begin before winter weather arrives. The applicant's requesting that the ordinance on your agenda be approved on first and second reading the same day. We've outlined the steps for that on page 14 of the report, and we would stand for any questions you have.
Okay, questions for staff? No questions for staff. Okay, we have
Thank
any
you.
public comment at this time? Yay.
Commissioners, Jeff Gillum, representing SMB Motels. I'm going to make it real short. As you know, this has been a long project coming. We've been talking about economic development. This has been in the works for a long time. Beautiful motel with a convention center. Being that it's a high-quality motel, as Dean mentioned, of course, we do have higher ceilings that go along with the convention, so it's very important to meet that height. We're at about 42 feet just at the gutter line, so you can imagine, you know, the roof and keeping the mass and the proportions intact does get us up to that 61 feet. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have. We think it's going to be a great development for Salina. The contractor and owner is real anxious to get started. If you've been out there, you can see they've moved all the dirt. They've done everything they can do, and they've sort of been on hold for a couple of weeks waiting this variance so that he can get his permit and move forward. Any questions?
For Mr. Gillum? I got a quick question,
Sure.
and it has more to do with the appearance. And because the drawings that we've seen, it shows that it's quite a nice appearance with the materials that Mr. Andrew had described. Typically, is this would you consider this sort of a higher end finish?
It is. The Hilton Garden Inn with the convention center is one of their higher end branding, if you will. And they have certain standards, as you can imagine, for us to submit to Hilton Garden. They look for certain things, so we've exceeded their expectations, have their approval, and they're excited about it. So you bet.
Okay.
We're really excited about the project.
Great, appreciate that. Questions? No.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay, any further public comment at this time? And seeing none, bring it back to the commission for action and potential motion. And there would be, if an affirmative, there would be a request here as it appears for a second reading as well.
Move that we approve application number Z08-10A, requesting approval of an amendment to an existing PC5 district and the approval of a final site development plan for a proposed hotel with a building height of 61 feet.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 15-10811 on first reading. Is there any further comment at this time? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 5-0. Okay.
And I move that we declare a compelling public interest that exists to allow first and second readings of the ordinance for the same day.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second declaring a compelling public interest for a second reading on the same day. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 5-0.
I move that we approve on second reading ordinance number 15-10811.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve on second reading ordinance number 15-10811. If I could get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Crawford,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Blanchard.
Aye, that motion carries 5-0. Okay, thank you, guys. Do we have any other business at this time?
I attended drug court today. And it was really an educational experience. I didn't realize what goes on in a drug court. You would think that it's something that's full of criminals, but it wasn't. It was full of young people. And very few people actually looked like they actually belong there. They looked like people that you see walking up and down the street. The judge is not really well, he's a judge, but he's also a counselor and he's also a coach. And which was kind of interesting. And I guess the drug treatment is in phases. And so as you pass a phase of the drug treatment program, he initiates clapping. And so everyone claps as people complete the phases of their drug program. And they're presented with an incentive, which is usually amounts to a gift card to Subway or McDonald's or something like that. And then the people, for the most part, return to their seats so that they can clap for the other people that are walking up in front of the judge. And so that was, I was encouraged by that program, thinking, well, this is a lot better than throwing people in jail or doing something that's pretty much not non-productive for kids that are, I'll say kids, that have not made good decisions, but have the opportunity to change their lives. And while they're doing the, taking the whatever treatment program that they're signed up for, they also complete community service and that sort of thing too. So it was a good experience. I encourage anyone else to take part in that if you want to.
As
Well,
a spectator. As a spectator.
As a spectator,
Right.
of course.
Well,
and you will get looks, because you're going to be, well, I was definitely the oldest person in the room. And they're,
You're the oldest person in this room.
These are there for. So, they were all waiting for my name to be called, I guess.
Wait, I should check. Isn't he? Isn't he the oldest person in this room? Okay, technically,
It's
you
close.
are. Yeah, I was thinking about going by and checking that out too. Hey, just real quick, I just wanted to thank again staff for, with the EDO. That's been a big haul, and our aim is to have better accountability and better results and better outcomes, and I think we're well on our way. But you guys did a great job, and Greg, you did double duty. So. Yeah, well, great work, and I think we all appreciate it, so.
I also would like to bring up, I went by the VFW on Crawford today, and I noticed that their door has been bashed in, and part of the building in the very front on Crawford, and it must have just happened overnight. Looks like somebody might have run into it. Some of the siding is messed up anyway. So if there's anybody out there who is good with contracting, or I haven't talked to any of them there, but if you can help any of the veterans, that would be a good way to. I know they're operating on a shoestring most of the time at the VFW, so
Right.
if there's anybody that can help them contract-wise, or be a good way to promote Veterans Day, Wednesday.
And it is Wednesday, 11 o'clock, Sunset Park. It'd be great to see everybody who can make it out there. at 11 o'clock on Wednesday. Okay. Who feels like adjourning?
So move.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That carries 5-0, surprisingly.